Recovery podcast is real life stories from everyday people recovering from substance or behavioural addictions. Please visit the website www.lifeinrecovery.co.uk for social media links and a range of books by your podcast host and author, Ren Coy.
Hello and welcome to the Life in Recovery podcast. I hope you're doing well. Thank you for tuning in and listening to this episode. Please, as always, subscribe on your podcast app and rate the podcast. Give us a 5 stars if you like what you hear. And please share the podcast around your social media. Tell your friends. You know, the whole point of this podcast is to try and help people that are potentially suffering with substance or behavioural addictions. And everybody's suffering to some degree. You know, everybody goes through some sort of pain, and I think that a lot of the topics discussed in this podcast can be really, really beneficial to a lot of people, not just those in addiction. And today is the perfect example of a woman who suffered greatly in her early life, a lot of childhood trauma, which is a topic that's come up many times on the podcast recently, and also a warning that this podcast does contain conversation around sexual misconduct, specifically rape, in case you find that triggering. It is an absolutely insane story. It is probably the craziest story that I've heard so far in my 10 years of recovery. And obviously it has a happy ending because I'm speaking with Amy and she is now a registered psychotherapist. But yeah, fasten your seatbelts for this one. I hope you enjoy listening to this story as much as I enjoyed speaking with Amy. The most intriguing things when you sent me the message was that you're a psychotherapist, is that right?
Right, a registered psychotherapist.
A registered psychotherapist, and you're also 23 years in recovery as well?
Yes.
Is that alcohol or drugs or both?
Both.
Okay, cool. And how long have you been a registered psychotherapist?
So I have had my credential since 2015.
Okay.
And I had to go through a bunch of stuff in order to be able to even get that credential, because the reality was that I had a lot of stuff from my past that came up, and when I went to the board to get that credential, I still had some restitution that I needed to pay, like to the tune of like $7,000. And I had to pay that before they would actually give me my credential. So.
But you got there in the end.
Yes, got there in the end. So the felony conviction didn't help, but yeah, it took a lot to do it. 5-hour test.
Well, congratulations and well done. Are you now practicing as a psychotherapist?
I am doing a lot of interventions and sober coaching and sober companion stuff. Yeah. That keeps me a lot more busy than my psychotherapy stuff. I will do some therapy, like I'll do some relapse prevention stuff, and I'll have people come over and do sessions based on that. But a lot of it's just, credibility and having those letters after my name look really good. Yeah,
definitely. Definitely. I've thought about going down that route myself, because I did the counselling skills up to level 3 in the UK, and then I then moved into management in the job that I do. So I kind of left the counselling and the therapy behind, but I definitely have considered going back into it and getting those credentials, because I mean it does matter actually. People do take you a lot more seriously when you've got those credentials after your name, I think.
Absolutely, they do, and you make more money. So
yes, very true, very true. And you live in the beautiful state of Colorado, is that correct?
I do. I was born and raised here.
Wonderful. It's on my bucket list of places to visit in the future because I just think it's absolutely a beautiful part of the world.
We'll come out and I'll show you around and get you plugged in and some of the meetings around town and some of the people, and
I would
we'll go
absolutely.
snowboarding.
Yes, that would be amazing. Well, I'm just learning to ski at the moment because I've got my stag do is in February. I'm getting married in July, and we're going skiing in at the end of February to Bulgaria. But I actually can't ski, so I'm just learning to ski now. So you never know, in the future I might be able to snowboard and come out to Colorado. But I've also got a baby on the way as well, so there'll be no trips to America next year, that's for sure.
Congratulations. Sounds like a pretty exciting few years is coming up for you.
Thank you very much. Yeah, I think 2020 is going to be the making of me somehow. I've just got rid of my nice Audi A3 as well and bought a 7-seater Ford Galaxy to carry the family around in. So that was a little bit of a blow to my ego.
Oh, I bet. I know. I could never do the minivan thing. I can tell you. Like, I am a sports car fan.
Yeah.
And I've had cars with turbos. Like, most of my little sports cars have had turbos in it.
Yeah.
And I finally got an SUV a few months ago. Let me tell you, that is like, it's a huge adjustment.
Yeah.
I
Well,
never wanted an SUV, but I do live in Colorado.
yeah. Well, at least you feel at home with an SUV in Colorado.
I don't know. And I really, really like a little sporty car that has some get up and go.
Yeah, definitely. I like my little sports car, but it's a program of humility, as they keep telling me. So this has definitely humbled me. Just the first question that I wanted to ask you, actually, before I get into your kind of life story, was I've been talking to a lot of people recently, and one of the topics that keeps coming up is about childhood trauma, and and how that affects people in later life, and the correlation with addiction as well. And I just wanted to know what your thoughts on that were, because I know people have got different opinions, and it'd be interesting to hear yours, Amy.
Well, I truly am right along the same lines as you. I had a lot of childhood trauma, and I've met a lot of people that don't have childhood trauma that are addicts and alcoholics, but I suffered at the hand of an alcoholic. My dad was an alcoholic, and my mom was religiously abusive, but also physically abusive and emotionally abusive.
Yeah.
And I had a lot of sexual trauma growing up. My dad's drinking buddies took advantage of me. My youth leader at my church took advantage of me, like a priest. I mean, I started to think that I had victim written on my forehead.
Yeah.
And all of these things happened before I ever took my first drink.
Wow.
And I think a lot of that stuff, I mean, it absolutely changes you. Sex abuse changes you. Getting physically abused. I mean, one of the times that my mom abused me, I was 14 and I had snuck out of the house with this dude that I met, and I went on this whole tangent and got caught by the cops because I was out after curfew, and they were like, tell us where you live, and I wouldn't tell them. And finally they convinced me and said that they would talk to my mom and make sure that nothing would happen, because I told them, like, I probably will die tonight if you take me back to her.
Yeah.
And they were like, we'll talk to her, it'll be no problem. And when they dropped me off, before they even left the gravel of our driveway, my mom had a 1x1 stick and she hit me over 100 times. And
Oh my God.
blood and bruises from the middle of my back to the backs of my knees. And I left home as a result of that. I knew that either she was going to kill me or I was going to kill her.
Wow. So that is traumatic, to say the least.
Yeah. Saw my dad stab a fork through my mom's hand. There was a lot of abuse. He took a 2x4 to my brothers. And, we rarely invited anybody over because my dad was a raging alcoholic.
Yeah.
But the crap kind of rolls downhill. So my dad was beating my mom and my brothers, and my mom was beating all of us. So.
Yeah, and it's that kind of abuse is very much normalized, isn't it? A lot of the time, people just, that are in those situations, they just think this is normal, and even though I suppose deep down they know that it isn't, and they can see examples of friends and maybe other family members and stuff that are around them that aren't going through that kind of abuse. And like you said, not everybody that becomes an alcoholic or an addict has suffered that type of trauma, but I've always said that it's on a gradient, and I think that I'm a staunch believer that the worst case scenario, those that end up, intravenously injecting heroin and living on the streets, homeless, when you dig deeper, they tend to be the ones that have suffered absolutely, the worst levels of trauma, and also those that become, dependent alcoholics as well.
Absolutely. I think that that's so true.
And where did your journey take you then? So you left home at what, the age of 14, 15?
I did. I was 14 when I left home, and not too long after that, I got pregnant with my first daughter. And my dad had died of cirrhosis of the liver right before that incident took place, and so I no longer had my father around.
Yeah.
And just leaving the house and moving in with some people from the church. I wasn't going to tell my mom I got pregnant, so my youth leader at the church told her, and she immediately threw together a shotgun wedding. So, I got married at 15 with her signature and a judge's signature. Had my first daughter at 16.
Yeah.
Got divorced at 17 because I married an abusive man. Yeah, he choked me until I was blue, and I decided to leave that situation and not grow up in the same environment, or really have my daughter grow up in the same environment that I grew up in. And while I was going through a divorce with him, I was living in Colorado Springs, right outside of Fort Carson. So GIs everywhere. So that was definitely my second addiction.
Yeah.
Drugs and alcohol were first, and men were my second. I always jokingly say to my sponsees, they're like a bottle with a zipper for me. So I got into a relationship with a guy, and he said, "Hey, Amy, we should drink tonight." Because before that, I would let all the guys come to my house. They would have kegs there, and I would never drink. I would take their keys and make sure that they didn't drink and drive. And I really told myself from the time that I was little that I would never drink because I never wanted to be like my dad.
Yeah.
And he was like, "Oh, come on, Amy. You can have a couple of Jack Daniel's Lynchburg lemonades. We'll stay here. Nothing will happen." And so he brought in four of those drinks and said, "Two are for you and two are for me." And I slammed my two down and took his second one and slammed it down and sent him back to the liquor store for more. And while he was gone, I went next door to the next door neighbor's house and took a shot of everything that they had in their liquor cupboard.
Yeah.
And it was right after my 18th birthday. It was like Halloween night because there were pictures. I don't remember any of it, but there were pictures of me like with this happy Halloween sign. And when he got back, I don't really know what happened, but apparently I drank more. But I woke up in the bathtub covered in my own vomit with him laying on the floor next to me saying, "Amy, if you ever drink again, I'm going to leave you." I'm like, "What did I do?"
Yeah.
And he said, "Well, when I got home last night with more alcohol, you were in the shower with some other dude." I'm in the shower with some dude that I don't even know where I found him in my shower. So yeah, I swore off alcohol, but I don't think it was more than a month before I was drinking again. I'm sure I had alcohol poisoning. I felt horrible like a week after that.
Yeah. So the monster was unleashed.
Oh yeah, from day one, I was a blackout drinker.
Yeah.
And I really don't know where my kid was. That's still to this day, 23 years later, to this day, I don't know if my kid was in the house while I was doing that or where she was. And I just, that's something that I live with every day, that shame.
Yeah. And that's a massive motivator just to drink even more, isn't it?
Absolutely.
So that was the age of 18, and then when did you, how long was your drinking career? Did you stop drinking like quite soon, or did you carry on drinking for many years?
So really the progression just got worse and worse. So I started with alcohol and definitely said that I was never going to do anything else. And I was drinking on a regular basis. There were kegers on our lawn all the time. And then by the time I was 19, I started going down and getting fake IDs because all these guys were old enough to drink, and my friends were all 21 so they could go to the bar. And I went down to Fast Eddie's passport photo place and got myself a fake ID and went to a bar one night, and my ex-husband happened to be there and called the police on me and had me arrested for underage drinking. And then I got in trouble for all kinds of stuff, falsifying government documents, and I'm sitting in jail. And one of the guys that I met at the bar came and bailed me out of jail. So of course I married him on a dare in Rock Island, Illinois.
Sorry to laugh so loudly, but it's just hilarious, isn't it?
Yeah. So I'm standing in front of the judge, and it's funny because by this time I had started using drugs, and he was really into acid. And so we were buying like sheets of acid, and the guys on post could do acid because it was out of their system pretty soon. And if they had a UA in a couple days, it wasn't there. And so I'm doing acid before we go into the courthouse. And all I remember of the whole ceremony is the judge going, "Are you on any mind altering chemicals or something like that?" And I'm just like laughing at this judge, and he marries us. And from there, I mean, it was a total nightmare because I told this guy, I'm like, "You can't tell anybody that we're married." I was living in this project called Team Teen, which was a old Victorian apartment home where I was going to school, and it was for single mothers with one child. Like that would have totally ruined it. And he was pretty volatile anyway. He had slammed on the brakes one time on the highway doing like 100 miles an hour, and I didn't have my seatbelt on, and I hit the windshield and like cracked the whole windshield with my head. And so like abusive relationship after abusive relationship.
Yeah.
And one night he came to my house and I said, "Where have you been? I haven't even seen you in a couple days." And he was like, "Yeah, I tried to kill myself." And I was like, "Really? Well, what did you do?" And he said, "Oh, I tried to take my Jeep off of a cliff." And I'm like, "Oh my God, you can't do anything right. You can't even kill yourself." And, like that was the kind of person I was in relationships with other people.
Yeah.
And a couple of days later, I got a phone call from his sergeant saying, "Amy, we need you to come down here and sign some paperwork." And I was like, "For what?" And of course, I was smashed out of my mind. I don't even know what I was on, but I couldn't drive on post. And so I found one of my friends, and we went out to my car, and I had locked my keys in my car. So I pulled pull a stake out of the ground and bash the window in of my own car and sit on glass going into the post and find that he's on top of the barracks trying to kill himself. And they want me to sign paperwork to get him admitted into a psychiatric ward, which I did. And that's the last time I ever saw him. So that was 28 days after the marriage. And then I thought, I don't know, I put in paperwork to have the marriage annulled. So of course I didn't follow through with any of that. And I ended up being married to him for like 4 years or something, 4 or 6 years.
Yeah. You didn't even see him in that time?
No, oh no. Nope. Have never seen or heard him since that day.
Wow. Bizarre.
Yeah. Very bizarre. So that just shows you like the progression, because by that time, like I'm smoking crack, and I'm, doing all kinds of other things. And, after that little incident, I meet another guy, and this guy is like totally straight-laced, good guy. only drinks, doesn't do anything else. But he's the guy who's like, why do you have to be drunk or high every time you're around me? And I'm like, because I have to be drunk or high to be around you. Like I can't be around anybody without being altered.
Yeah.
And he finally goes, hey, do you want to go to Maryland and meet the parents? And I'm like, oh, like those are like horror words. Don't tell me you love me, and don't tell me that you want me to meet your parents. And finally I agreed to go, and I had another fake ID by that time. And I'm drinking on the plane. He had just had his wisdom teeth out. And I'm like, do you still have those pills? And he's like, oh, I hate the way they make me feel. And I'm like, I love the way they make me feel. So now I'm taking his pills on the plane and drinking. And I have my little 2-year-old daughter with me. And I don't even remember getting to Maryland. Next thing you know, he's sending me to, I don't know. I don't even know where he sent me, to Washington or something with my best friend. And she ended up kicking me out of there. So that was the last time I saw him. That was the last time I saw my best friend. And I'm standing in a airport, and I'm not even really sure where, but I'm looking down at this little 2-year-old, and I'm not sober, but just looking at her going, really? Like, you're a worse parent than your father was. It was like a little brief moment of clarity. Yeah. Like, really, I'm going to do this to my kid. And I went back to Colorado, dropped her off with her dad, thank God, and signed some crazy paperwork. Let me tell you, like I said that I was going to move to Australia, that he didn't need to pay me any child support or alimony anymore, and that I would bring her back on her weekends for visitation. And like, it was just absolutely nuts. But I set out to have the biggest and best party of all time that weekend. And it was New Year's Eve of 1995 when I got home, and I went back to my apartment. One of my friends was staying there. She had punched a hole in my wall, got mad about something, and then covered it up with a calendar. And I was super volatile. Like, I was not a nice person, really drunk or sober, but if I was on anything, I was really violent. And so I kicked a hole in the wall big enough to walk through, took a baseball bat to all of the light fixtures and walls and cupboards in my house and kicked out all the windows with my bare hands and feet. And so that was where the restitution came from, when I had to pay for $10,000 of restitution.
Yeah.
For damaging the apartment.
Yeah.
And yeah, just absolutely nuts. Shooting Roman candles and pop bottle rockets into the apartment above me. I hated the people that lived up there.
Just to terrorize them.
Absolutely a terrorizer.
Yeah. Did you ever spend any time incarcerated then, or did you manage to escape that?
Yeah, so that first time that I spent 7 hours in jail, and then that guy came and bailed me out. And then what happened the rest of that night was that I kept on getting like worse and worse. Like, I lived right next door to the biggest crack house in Colorado Springs. And so I'm sure I was doing crack. Who knows what else I was doing. But I called all my friends and I was like, I got a credit card in the mail. Let's go to Las Vegas and party with Metallica. To this day, I have no idea if Metallica was even in Las Vegas, but in my mind they were. And we drove to the airport, and they wouldn't let us fly because we were all too messed up to go anywhere.
Yeah.
But I filled my car up to the roof. I had this little like Chevy Chevette, and it was a total POS. Let me tell you, like, you had to park it on a hill, pop the clutch to get it to go. It, like, I had kicked the windshield so many times that there were barely any spots of like clear glass that you could see out of. And I had oil and antifreeze in the back seat. And when they wouldn't let us fly anywhere, I was like, fine, I'll drive. So I'm doing Ace Ventura Pet Detective, like driving with my foot, with my head out the window and throwing empty Bacardi Breezer bottles into oncoming traffic and running red lights and doing like 90 miles an hour and like just being absolutely nuts. And got pulled over by the police. Told them the reason that I was being so nuts was because I had just won the lottery. I won $1 million. And my friends took pictures of me with this cop on the side of the road. He let me go. Got a little bit further down the road, and my friends were like, let us out. You're going to get us killed. So I'd leave my friends on the side of the road, go back to my apartment, and get dressed up in my wedding dress from when I was 15. And what I didn't tell you about that is my mom was super religious, so I couldn't get married in a white wedding gown. I had to get married in like this peach, like lace prom dress thing that was like, like 20 feet out to the side.
Yeah.
I decided that I was going to put that on with my Doc Martens and put my hair in a bun on top of my head. And I was going to drive to Las Vegas by myself, Las Vegas by myself. And one of my friends happened to be in my apartment, and she said, Amy, I have your keys. You're not going anywhere. And she had called the police. And I was like, yeah, but you don't have my spare keys. And I got into my car, and there was an officer standing behind my car. Like, I vaguely remember this. And I thought it was a dream. And this is like some of the PTSD stuff that's come back, but I could see this guy in my rearview mirror, and I wasn't going to stop. So luckily he moved. And I take off downtown Colorado Springs on Bijou, and I see red and blue lights in my rearview mirror. And I'm like, oh, look, my own personal escort to Las Vegas. And now it's New Year's Day of 1995. And I go to get onto the on-ramp of I-25, which is the main highway in Colorado. And I threw my car into reverse and slammed into all the cop cars behind me. They don't like that very much. They get out with their guns drawn. And so that was the first big arrest that I had. And they put handcuffs on me and put me in the back seat of the car. And it's pretty uncomfortable to be in handcuffs. But it's really uncomfortable to be in handcuffs when you have a dress the size of Texas on. So I ripped the dress off, like started from the back and like ripped the whole bottom of the dress off and got the handcuffs around the front of me. And so now they're threatening me with escape charges. And they open the door, and I start fighting the police, and they hogtie me and mace me and throw me in the backseat of the car again. By this time, the news cameras are there. And, they do the little blur across the naked parts when you're on the news. And my heart stopped. And I can tell you that for a long time, sober, and even while I was still using that, I just couldn't believe that they saved me. But I woke up in a hospital bed later on that day with my hand handcuffed to the bed and charcoal down the front of my paper hospital gown, and an officer standing at the door telling me that I was in big trouble. And I was like, for what? I had a bruise from like my knee to my hip. And so I was like, police brutality, like whatever. And they said I was arrested for first-degree assault on 2 police officers and eluding the police and DUI and like tons of other things. But they found that I had barbiturates and angel dust in my blood, and I don't even remember taking that stuff. But I was really one of those people that if somebody handed me a handful of anything or gave me anything, I would take it. It didn't matter to me. Like, my drug of choice was more. I ended up in jail, and they let me out immediately on a PR bond. And I got out. That girl that was sitting on my couch that had my keys, I went to her apartment. She wasn't there, so I kicked her door in. That's what you do. And was immediately arrested again. And this time they weren't going to let me out on a PR bond. I was going to school to be a medical assistant. My life from the outside looked pretty good. I Like I had a place to live. I had a job. I was working at Fort Carson at the hospital, and I was sitting in jail and got paperwork saying ex parte, change of motion. You're a danger to yourself and society. So a custody order that my ex-husband, the abuser, got custody of my daughter. And I sat in solitary confinement for the next 65 days. The girl that I was shooting pop bottle rockets and Roman candles into her apartment above happened to be in jail at the same time that I was in jail. So I got into my second physical fight and maced the second time while I was in jail. And so that's part of the reason why they put me in solitary. But I was an absolute nightmare while I was in jail. I mean, I was 20 years old, and, you know, like I was antagonizing everybody. I probably weighed 98 pounds, but just like threatening like 100 women in jail. Like, talk about nuts. Absolute craziness. Like, they were putting me in rubber rooms and duct taping helmets on my head and putting me in leather cuffs just to try to keep me safe, like from hurting myself. And, you know, while I was in jail, I wasn't really thinking about like, how can I get my life back? Or I was evicted from my apartment while I was in there. Got kicked out of that medical assistant program. Now I owed them like 16 grand. And there were so many things that were just like, my life totally fell apart in those 3 months. And when I got out, I was just like, I was marking the days off on the calendar, not so that I could see my kid, not so that I could get my life back, but so that I could find out who would buy me a bottle of Bacardi 151 and a pack of Marlboro Reds, so I didn't have to feel the way that I felt anymore. I'd attempted suicide in jail a couple of times, and they take everything away from you when you do that. So it's pretty desperate to not feel. And when I got out of jail, that is exactly what I did. I don't remember leaving the parking lot of that jail. And for the next year, I was on a mission, I think, to kill myself. Like, I did not want to feel anything. Didn't tell anybody I had a kid. Started really, you know, couch surfing, finding a dude in a bar and living with him until I ruined the relationship or ruin, you know, whatever I had built, I would ruin it. I started putting a needle in my arm. And I remember this guy one night that I met at a bar, and he was like, you know, I really want to help you. Like, I want to help you get clean. And, you know, by this time I'm selling drugs and I'm carrying guns and I'm just being like absolutely nuts. Like, everybody is like scared of me. And and that's fear. You know, like I was so afraid that I was gonna like just be like super psycho to everybody I was around, because I was constantly living in guilt and shame and remorse and fear. And, you know, I remember this guy saying like, Amy, I don't want you to do drugs in my house, and I don't want you to put a needle in your arm, and I'm really going to try to help you. And I really believed this guy. I knew that he wanted to help me, and I just couldn't not. And, you know, before that, I'd always had like friends that would shoot me up, and this night I didn't have anybody, so I tried it for the first time and I missed the vein. And so when he walked in, I'm like laying like kind of slumped over with a pool of blood underneath my arm. And I will never, ever forget the look on that man's face, like horrified. And, you know, like all of my sobriety and all of, you know, the rest of the time that I was out there using, I always got a glimpse of that dude's face. Not too long after that, the DEA came in and raided his apartment, cut up all of his couches, you know, dumped everything out of his cupboards and everything. And I got a 911 page on my pager. And that happened to be on a Halloween night too, that I got this page. And I was like walking up the stairs to go to the apartment, and the SWAT team came up behind me and asked me if I was Amy, and I was like, yeah. And they're like, we need to search you. And so they searched me on the spot. And luckily I had made like this separate pouch inside my purse that I had sewn in, and I had 100 hits of acid on me. Like, I could still be in prison right now.
Yeah.
for all the drugs that I had on me when they found me.
Something must have been looking after you.
Yeah, something. I was absolutely a terror.
How long did this complete insanity carry on for?
Well, not too long after that. I mean, he left my box of belongings on the porch, and I don't really, I know I met another dude at another bar, and it wasn't too long after that I met this guy that I really liked at a party, and I had known this other guy in Colorado Springs that was super rich, and he had taken me to Mexico, and like it was just crazy. And he came down to celebrate my 21st birthday with me, and he had a brand new Dodge Stealth with temporary tags in the back window. Like it was like one of those limited editions, like only 12 were ever made. And he was like, "You can drive it." And then as soon as we got to the bar, he didn't realize that I drank as much as I did, because I was joking around with somebody there that I drank 12 shots of Bacardi 151 before we ever even left the apartment. And I didn't even appear to be drunk, and he let me drive his car. So after that, he took the keys away, got back to my apartment. He passes out, and I take the keys out of his pocket and take the car. And I'm driving the car down to the bowling alley to find my boyfriend and his friends, and I get a call. This is back in the day of the car phone, the big brick
Yeah.
that's like built into the phone. And he calls and goes, "Amy, bring my car back." And I'm like, "You have the wrong number, click." And right after that, I decided that I was going to do 60 in the parking lot of this mall that I was at, and hit one of the medians in the mall, popped all 4 tires, put a hole in the oil pan, and drove it around until it wouldn't drive anymore. So like totally blew the engine. And got back to my apartment, or headed back to my apartment, and got arrested. And the guy was like, "Amy, blah, blah, blah." And I'm like, "Oh, no, my name's not Amy." I give him a fake name, a fake social security card. Another cop comes up and says, "Why are you lying to this cop?" So I go to jail again, this time for, I don't know, lying to the police, and aggravated motor vehicle theft and domestic violence, and sit in jail. This is like December of 1995. And I'm still working on a deferred sentence from all the other stuff, and so it's like a 4-year deferred prison sentence. And I've been calling for a color every single day, and like doing all kinds of crazy things to not get busted. And like the consequences never ever deterred me, but now I'm looking at the prison time from before, and then more prison time for if I get busted for this. And I'm exhausted, seriously, like wanted to kill myself every single day. And that went on for a couple of months. And I think in March of 1996, I called my mom, and I really hadn't talked to her much in, years. She didn't really know what was going on with me. And she said, "Oh my God, I've been praying for you every day, and there's somebody in my store that wants to talk to you." And I'm like, "What? Who could want to talk to me? Seriously?" And she put this preacher on the phone, and like that was the last thing that I wanted, for a preacher to be talking to me. But he prayed, and I don't remember what he said, but whatever he said, I don't know, this warmth just came over me, like something that I hadn't felt in a long time. I told my mom I was depressed and I wanted to kill myself more than anything, and she said, "Have you ever thought about going to drug and alcohol rehab?" And I'm like, "For what? I do not have a problem. I'm depressed." And I said, "Just get me to a doctor, get me an antidepressant." And she said that she had looked into this program called Salvation. And she said, "If you go to treatment, I'll help you get your daughter back." And, really, that's probably the only thing anybody could have said to me to even make me consider it. So I'm 21 and decide to go to Salvation Army. Walk in the front door, find out that it's not a 6-week program. It's a 6-month program. And right back out the front door. I'm like, I am not doing 6 months. That's ridiculous. And call my mom, and she said, if you go to treatment, I'll help you get your daughter back. And so I went in, and I would say about 3 months into the program, I, would be sitting in group, and they would say things like, controlled drinking. Like, if you tried to control it and you couldn't stop and blah, 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 then you're probably an alcoholic. And I was like, oh my gosh, you people, like, why would you ever try to control it? I never, ever tried to control it. Not even one time. My friends tried to control it. I didn't. And so I decided to go out and try some controlled drinking while I was in rehab. And went out, had a couple of Clue and creams. And by the time that I got back to rehab, I drank like a gallon of water. And I immediately told my therapist, like, I can't. I don't want to lie to you, but I drank while I was out, and I know you're going to have to kick me out. And she was like, absolutely not, Amy. Like, I believe in you. I know that you're going to make it. And I'm going to put my job on the line for you. She goes, I don't want you to change your sobriety date. I don't want you to tell anybody. I know you're going to graduate from this program, and you're going to make it. And so I stayed, and I graduated from that program, and I got pregnant with my second daughter while I was in treatment.
That old classic.
But not by anybody that was in treatment. It was that same guy that I had gotten into the car accident in the Stealth with.
Oh, okay.
And so I was out on a weekend pass and got pregnant. And that's what everybody asked me, if I tell my story anywhere, was somebody in treatment? And I was like, no, not that I was above that, because I was messing around with some dudes in treatment too. But, they wanted to kick me out because they'd never had anybody pregnant in their, liability and all that. And I was about a month away from graduating. And so they let me stay. And when I got out of treatment, my brother picked me up, and he was my drinking and drugging buddy. Like, he was the first person I ever used cocaine with. And he's like, I brought a bowl. Let's celebrate you getting out of treatment. And I was like, yeah, I mean, I didn't like pot anyway. So what's the big deal? I'll take a couple of hits and nothing. And I thought nothing of it, really. And, about a week later, another guy that I had been living with said, Amy, let's go to No Excuses, which was this bar next to the 12-step meeting place that I was going to. And I was like, sure, why not? And he goes, a glass of wine would be really good for the baby. I was like, yeah, I've heard that everywhere. It would be good for the baby. And I didn't even like wine. I liked whiskey and Bacardi 151 and, crack and meth, but not wine. And I remember sitting there at the bar with that pink liquid in that glass and drinking it, really thinking that I could have one glass of wine, and ending up in a blackout with some dude in a hotel room. And what I remember about that night is waking up the next day, or really coming to, and picking my clothes up off the floor and trying not to wake this guy and going, really, Amy, are you really willing to lose another baby as a result of your drinking? And I walked out of there, and, while I was in treatment, I really didn't go to very many meetings. They told me that I needed to go and get my card signed, and I was like, absolutely not. Like, that's the most boring place on the planet. And so I went to the bar and had my card signed because I thought it would be funny. But I remember my counselor telling me about this place called Vitality. And she said, Jim and Larry and Greg are up there because I know you don't like women. And I walked up these stairs and sat in this meeting, and I was horrified that that's what my life had come to. Like, really, I'm 22 years old, and now I have to do this for the rest of my life. So I immediately picked up my 6-month chip because I should have had 6 months sober. I lied about it for the next 9 years. Um, but that was my last drink. So November 18th of 1996. I was at meetings for a long time, and I was just like I was living on the crumbs of the 12 steps. I didn't want to do the work. I didn't want to get a sponsor. And some things that happened, like I had a sponsor that told a bunch of my stuff, and I was like, see, this place is no different than anywhere else. And, I sat there miserable for a long time. Thank God for those old timers, especially Jim, that fed me the steps piece by piece, and gave me enough relief until I could actually get to a place where I loved myself enough where I could do the rest of the work. I think really those old timers saved me. They put band-aids on me. Every time I turned around, somebody was going, Amy, have you ever done a 4th and 5th step? And I'm like, God, what is the deal here? Like, you want me to do a 4th and 5th step? I'm fine. Like, I'm sober for years. My life looks great on the outside. I have a big brand new house and a new car and like all of this stuff. Like, leave me alone about the steps. But I was really miserable. One of my friends says, don't settle for relief, go all the way to recovery. And today I know what that means.
I like that. That's a nice line. I've never heard that before.
Love it. Because that's what I did. I settled for just a small piece of, what recovery and the 12 steps have to offer.
Yeah. It's funny because I've just gone back to OA because I cross addicted. Essentially, when I put the alcohol down, after a few years, I kind of cross addicted onto sugar primarily, chocolate, sweets, that kind of thing, and hit a bit of a rock bottom with that, and then tried the OA fellowship. And just similar to you, really, I've just sat in the meetings and I actually did get a sponsor and worked through the majority of the steps at one point, and I was doing really well, and then had that crazy thought that I was fixed and went and stopped going to the meetings, and then relapse back on the food again. And it's a difficult one because obviously I'm a member of AA, and that really works for me. I don't ever think about drinking, and I don't have the obsession for alcohol was completely lifted, whereas with food it's totally different. The obsession hasn't been lifted, and but then when I go to the meetings, I kind of sit there and I think I don't really want to be here, and I've not thrown, and it's like that thought, what you said, is this what my life's come to? It's just the ego again, and it's like, even though I've done it in one 12-step fellowship, for some reason, my ego doesn't like the fact that I have to go to this other 12-step fellowship. Doesn't really make any difference. It's like, just get a sponsor, work the steps, and do the work. You know what I mean?
Right.
And then you won't be miserable.
No, misery is better, right?
Yeah, that's it, isn't it?
I'll settle for every day.
I like a bit of misery. Well, I was talking to my best friend the other night on the phone, and we were talking about, he's doing dry January, and the comment that he made was, I want to be the best version of myself for my daughter. Him and his partner have just had a baby girl. And I said, yeah, I'm the same. I said, I want to be the best version of myself for my kids and my daughter when she comes along, and my partner as well. But then there's still that little nagging notion of where, you're happy with that little bit of misery that you've still got in your life. It's just habitual, I think.
Yeah, I think so too. I was on the phone this morning talking to one of my spiritual mentors, and that's what he said. We don't learn by consequences. We don't. If we did, we would get in trouble one time and we would never do it again. Yeah. We live by living with the consequences and the results of those consequences in our life. That's what we learn from. Yeah. We don't learn from the actual consequence. It's the guilt, the shame, the remorse, all the things that go on inside of us. That pain. The only motivator for me, pain.
But why is that though? Why is that though? Why is that the motivator for the addict in inverted commas, and it's not the motivator for the non-addict in inverted commas?
I think I really truly think it's because our brain is different. Like our brain operates on a different system, and that it takes a more intense example of everything for us to get it. Just like we needed the intensity of the drugs and alcohol, and we need the intensity of the drama of, the relationships, or, the craziness that spikes our brain with sugar. Like I really truly think that it's the part of our brain that is diseased that needs that intensity. Like I'm not going to get it with like a subtle reminder, like don't do this. I
Yeah.
need the pain. I need the 2x4.
Well, the brain is malleable, isn't it? And it
Yeah.
does, like, I think that, that you hear all these little adages in the 12-step fellowships, like my emotional and my spiritual growth was stunted at the time I started drinking or the time I started using drugs. And that is true, but also on a physical level, that's true as well. Because when you actually start drinking at such an early age, like I did at the age of 13, and then properly when I was like 16, 17 and hit it really hard at that point, it does stop you. It does affect your brain. It literally like ruins your brain. So therefore, clearly, you're gonna have issues with things like impulse control.
Right.
But yeah,
That is so true.
it's such
And your
a,
brain's not fully developed till you're 24 anyway. So if you're stunting your growth anytime before you're 24, you're dealing with an immature brain anyway. And, your brain takes a lot to go back to that neuroplasticity. And if you've created permanent brain damage, you're never going to get those neural pathways that are going to be healthy.
Yeah, and you know what? That's the reason. I mean, I don't know what your opinion on traditional medicines is, but that's the reason why I got into traditional medicines a couple of years ago, because a friend of mine introduced me to the idea of like ayahuasca and psilocybin and peyote and all those kind of things. And at first, I listened to him and I said, "You are absolutely crazy." I said, "That is a relapse every day of the week, and I would never even consider it." But after I wrote my first book in 2015 and I did a lot of research into it, I realized that actually what those medicines do is they rewire the brain, and they actually make it like the neuroplasticity, they bring it back again, and they create new pathways in the brain. And this was something that I was so intrigued by that I mean, I suppose in a way, really, when I look back at it, even though I didn't think it at the time, but I risked my sobriety by going and doing an ayahuasca ceremony, because it could have gone wrong. I didn't know. I trusted and I had faith that it wouldn't lead me back to any sort of to alcohol or narcotics, and it didn't. And it was exactly what I thought it was going to be, and it was like having 10 years of therapy in one night. But that it really helped me to see that the brain, it does have a lot to do with the brain. It's not just an emotional and mental illness. It is like the physical component of it is a real issue as well.
Yeah. I mean, I have not done enough research on it to see if I would do it or not. I don't think that I ever would try it, although I see like the belladonna treatment in the big book. That
Yeah.
is a hallucinogen.
Yeah.
Done. So, they were trying it in early sobriety. They did have successful sobriety. What worries me about it is all of the things that I did while I was out there doing mushrooms, doing ecstasy, doing acid, all of those other things that, could have that bad effect if it's not done properly. So, thank God that you're still sober and you didn't go off the deep end. But there are lots of other things out there that are super amazing and help with that neuroplasticity. And I've done a lot of neurofeedback, and I've done this trauma therapy called rapid resolution trauma therapy. And it was a trauma therapy that was developed for women that were sexually mutilated and were killing themselves before they could get enough therapy for them that they could actually live their lives. And so they developed this trauma therapy that's kind of a mix between a semi-hypnotic state and kind of an EMDR therapy, but not reliving the things that you've done in the past, but just getting enough of it so that your brain will take that 3D picture that's in the forefront of your brain and send it to the memory bank where it should be. Not that you don't remember it, but that you remember it the way that you should have a memory, not reliving it in your prefrontal cortex. That saved my life. Absolutely saved me. I worked through the process of the steps around 10 years sober, gave me so much relief, gave me recovery, put a fire under me like nothing else has done. Like, it lit the furnace and put all of the chain links together that I had been hearing in meetings for those 10 years. And I sponsor a multitude of people. I get to tell my story all over the world. Like, I get to do amazing things as a result of working the process of the steps. But I was still having nightmares. I was still wanting to kill myself. Like, there was like all of this stuff going on inside of my head that I thought, like, I'm going to have to like seriously shoot myself in the head for any of this to go away. And so I did a week of inpatient treatment, and it was for trauma. It was a lot of different modalities that they used in that week. And I'm telling you, like, I saw stuff, and, I don't tell a whole lot of people that I saw like spirits, like, coming out of all of the trauma in that house. Like, I could see like a black mist. And, I'm a very logical, succinct person. And, like, I don't believe in ghosts or, like, I don't believe in any of that stuff. And some of it seriously could have been for me not sleeping. But I believe that a lot of that trauma came out there. And then doing this rapid resolution trauma therapy after that absolutely was a game changer for me. I can sleep. I have peace. Like, I'm not waking up in cold sweats. I'm not having all of these PTSD dreams, because one of the things that had happened like later, I'm not really even sure what period of my drinking and drugging, but I think it was right around that time that I went to jail on New Year's Day of 1995 that I was raped at knife point. And I think it was by one of those guys in that crack house next door. But to this day, like, I get flashes of a face, but it's nothing like it was before. Like, I can't wear a t-shirt that covers my neck, because to this day I feel like I'm being choked. So, like, that's something that I don't think will ever go away. And I've worked on it, and it's better, believe me. Like, I don't like freak out. But yeah.
Yeah, I think that finding what works in terms of getting to the root of that trauma. And again, it's on a gradient, isn't it? I mean, now having listened to your story, I can I've heard that it was a crazy story. You know what I mean? Like, everybody's story is different, and some people go a lot further down the line than other people do. And obviously there was sexual trauma involved there. There was physical trauma. There was mental abuse. There was obviously the drug and alcohol abuse that went on for years and years and years. You've really you've hit all those, like the ACEs, when it calls the adult adverse childhood experiences. Well, you've ticked every single box more or less, and also ticked every box in adult experiences as well. So you clearly, like, working through the 12 steps, and this is kind of what I've just written in my current book that I'm writing at the moment, is the 12 steps. I'll absolutely swear by it, and I'm just a huge proponent of the 12 steps, but it will only take you so far, because it can't get to the root of those issues. And you made a point earlier about they were using belladonna treatment, and it's in Bill Wilson's story in the big book, and that was a psychedelic, and they were trying everything they could to get to the root of this spiritual malady, this real deep rooted issue in people. And whatever you find that works for you, providing it doesn't lead you back to a drink, then go for it, and do as much as you can. Like, see, I think a lot of it as well, I don't know what your opinion on God or a higher power is, but for me, a lot of it is about seeking. It's like, how far are you willing to go to seek that which will solve your problem? And it does say in the big book, and I do agree, is that it's deep down within us, the actual answer. That power actually does come from within. but it's blocked by all this stuff. There's layers and layers and layers of trauma and shit and experiences on top of this, light that is within us. And once it gets unblocked and the light comes out, then like you're in that new dimension, the fourth dimension, as it talks about in the big book, and you're living a life of serenity, and that's when the promises really do come true, at least in my experience.
Right. Well, I've had a really hard time with the God thing my whole entire life, since I was sexually abused in my church by my youth leader, whom I really trusted, and then my mom using religion to abuse us, and saying spare the rod and spoil the child. Like, it really, there's a part in the 12 and 12 that talks about people that have had religion and found it wanting, people that have found it and lost it.
Yeah.
And when I was going to church when I was little, I'm telling you, like, I wanted to be a missionary. I wanted to help the world. I wanted everybody to be saved and to be baptized. And I learned every scripture verse. And, like, I was an Awana's leader, like all of these things. And I immediately turned my back because I was like, the one place on the whole planet that I felt safe, God didn't protect me there either. And so, like, really meeting that old timer in my meeting, Jim, he was a game changer for me. Like, every time I thought about drinking or using, I would be like, well, what would Jim think? And he would tell me things like, Amy, get in your helicopter and look at the big picture. See, the big picture isn't so bad. And, like, I could really, like, he would talk with his hands, and he would, tell me simple things like, don't, pole vault over mouse turds. And I was like, I have no idea what that means, but, just all of these little things that he said. And when I finally worked the process of the steps in a row with one person, she was like, what is your concept of a higher power? And I'm like, I'm never going to believe in God. Let me tell you, like, that's my problem. That's why I wouldn't work the steps, because I was like, ugh, like, this has God written all over it. And this woman read every word on every page to me, and she changed where it said God to higher power so that I could hear it. And when we got to that concept of God, she goes, why can't Jim be your higher power? Like, why can't he be? And she said, on page 55, it says it can be just as much as a feeling that you have for a friend. And, that was the game changer for me. Like, I wrote down all the qualities that Jim had, and he died of emphysema when I was around 10 years sober, which kind of propelled me into the work because I was suffering as a result of his death. I didn't realize that my higher power had died, but really today when I say a prayer, Jim's face is the face that I see, and that seeking of that power, and always looking for different things. Like, I have a lady in Australia that does these guided meditations for me, and I find a spirituality there that I can't find anywhere else. When I'm by an ocean, it's that constant seeking. It's, like, it's never finding, but always seeking, sponsoring lots of people, doing what I need to do for the community at large, because I was such a menace to society that, I better give back. I better give back way more than I took. And today, that's my philosophy. I'm not further away from a drink or a drug because I'm 23 years sober. I'm closer because I forget what it felt like 23 years ago to come in here and be that desperate.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. And that's a beautiful story about Jim. And it made me think of, there was an old guy, an old timer in my early meetings, and he used to say, do you remember when you were a child and you used to play hide and seek? And I said, yeah. And he said, when you were the seeker, he said, how hard did you seek to find that other child? And I said, oh, I'd seek like my life depended on it. And he'd say, seek God in the same way.
Beautiful. I love it. I love it.
Yeah, it's so true. And a higher power of your own understanding. I mean, I use the word God quite easily these days, but I was a staunch atheist when I came into recovery. And even though I'd had multiple spiritual experiences in the first year of my abstinence, I still didn't believe.
And it wasn't until somebody in a meeting, I heard somebody share in a meeting, and they said the words by Albert Einstein that coincidence is God's way of remaining anonymous. And that was the light bulb moment for me, because there'd been so many coincidences that had happened in that first year, 18 months, that it made me realize that my higher power was always there and was always tapping me on the shoulder and saying, I'm here. This is another example of I'm here. You just need to say hello. You just need to communicate. And my understanding of my higher power has evolved over the last 10 years, and it continues to evolve. And the easiest thing for me to understand as God is everything. I believe that God is everything. God is
Right.
God is everything that I experience. It is all the material. It's all the immaterial. It's everything that I can't see. And that's where I'm at the moment. But that might change. Tomorrow, next week, next month, it might be something different. Who knows?
Mm-hmm. I know one of my friends says God is everything or God is nothing. And if God is everything, then you get to be a part of everything. And if he's nothing, then you're a part of nothing. And I want to be a part of everything, And those coincidences that you talked about, I could tell you some super mind-blowing stories. There's no way on earth that a human could orchestrate some of the things that have happened in my life in those times where I needed a sign to say, yes, I was on the right track and that I was doing the right thing. And when I was at my lowest, I was in prison sponsoring some women, and I had one of the women that I was sponsoring was in there for murder. And somebody asked me, how could you sponsor a murderer? And I'm like, because I know what that anger feels like inside of you. I know what it feels like to want to murder somebody. And I'm just lucky that I'm not sitting there for murdering somebody, because I very well could have.
Yeah.
And, I'm sitting across the table from her and I'm listening to her fifth step. And I brought a little party in for all the sobriety dates for all the girls that were in there. And I heard her across the room talking to one of the other girls that I sponsor. And she was talking about her kids. Well, she was like, yeah, telling her their names. And I instantly recognized her kids' names. And I just listened to her, cry about how she didn't know where her kids were, and the adopted parents weren't responding to any of her letters. And her kids moved in with the adopted family right across the street from my house.
Wow.
I knew her kids. And, I watched her daughter run track, my daughter. And, there's no explanation on this planet for that.
Yeah.
And, just getting to go back and tell her, your God is so big, you have no idea. You have no clue how big this thing is. And, just amazing things, like the guy that the DEA came in and raided his apartment. I tried to find him for a long time, but I could not remember his last name. I lived with this guy, and my brain was so shot that I was like, man, I could remember that his first name was Ross, but couldn't remember his name to save my life. And one of my sponsees had just given birth to this little guy, and I went up to the hospital, and I'm looking at him in his little baby bed, and I see on the card it says Baby Weitzel. And I was like, oh my God, that's that dude's last name. I immediately messaged him on Facebook, and I'm like, I don't know if you remember me, but I lived with you in 1995. And of course, not too long after that, I get a message saying, yeah, how could I forget? I thought you were dead.
Yeah. Please leave me alone.
No, it wasn't even that. I told him that I owed him an amends. I wanted to sit down with him, and the first appointment that we had to meet, he canceled. So that I thought exactly what you said. Leave me alone. Why did you contact me? You were a psycho, roaring through my life. And we sat down, a week later and met, and I made my amends to him. I got to tell him where I am in my life and how many people I've gotten to help, and his, love and care, and the look on his face when he found me, there with blood all over the floor, was a motivation for me to stay sober. And I got to do an intervention on his ex-wife, and like I got to take his brother to his first Cocaine Anonymous meeting, and there were like so many things that happened in that amends that could have never taken place if I would have tried to orchestrate it myself.
Yeah.
And my sponsor was like, if you feel comfortable, Amy, you can say, is there anything I left out? Don't say, this whole thing that people love to say nowadays, like, what can I do to make it right? That is not what the book says. It says we go in there and we right the wrong. So we better know what we're going to do to right the wrong.
Yeah.
I did feel safe with him, so I asked him if there was anything I left out, which was horrifying to me to ask anybody if there was anything I left out because I was a blackout drinker. And he said, yeah, actually, you stole everything out of my bathroom. Everything. Like my toilet paper roll holder, my razor, like every single thing I had in my bathroom, you took it. Shower curtain holders. And I called you and I told you that if you didn't bring it back, I was going to arrest you. And you brought it back. So can you imagine like being in jail and being like, what are you here for? What are you here for? The great bathroom heist.
The great bathroom robbery. I stole a load of toiletries.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, I mean, that's just absolutely. I mean, the synchronicity and coincidence stories are like my bread and butter. My second book was called Anonymous God, and it was coincidence, synchronicity, serendipity, spiritual signposts, and psychedelics. And it was just a series of stories of all my coincidence stories. And, the interconnectedness of all things and the way in which, like you say, the way in which this universe works is just absolutely mind-blowing. And when you become sober, and then especially once you've had a spiritual awakening and you're actually awake and you're able to comprehend this stuff and the true nature of it all, it's overwhelming. I mean, one of the story, the one that blew my own mind was that I told it on the last podcast actually, so I won't tell that part of the story, but the top and bottom of it was I was in Australia, and through a coincidence I found out that my childhood friend, who was born in the same hospital as me, who I hadn't seen for 10 years, was living round the corner from me in Australia. And so we got in touch with each other, and then we figured out that we weren't able to meet up because we were both going travelling the next day. So we set off travelling, me and my partner at the time, and she'd met a woman who was a black woman, and the reason why I say she was a black woman will become clear in a moment. But she's a black woman, and we'd become really good friends with her, and she'd recommended this book to me, and it was like a self-help book, and it was called Don't Sweat the Small Stuff, and it's all small stuff. And she also had a pregnant sister who lived in a little town called Alice Springs. So we flew to Alice Springs from Melbourne, and we arrived there. And when we picked up the car from the airport, we drove into the town. And as we were driving into the town, I said to my partner, I think we're going to bump into Rosemary's sister. And my partner said, don't be stupid. There's about 20,000 people in this town. Why do you think we'd bump into her sister? And I said, I don't know. I've just got this really weird feeling. So we pull the car up at the supermarket and get out of the car. And as I was walking in to the front of the supermarket, this pregnant black woman was walking towards me. And I just said, there she is. And my partner said, what? And I went up to this woman and I said, excuse me. I said, have you got a sister called Rosemary that lives in Melbourne? And she said, yeah. And she looked really freaked out. And she said, where's the cameras? Because she thought it was like candid camera. And I said, I said, no, I said, there's no cameras. I said, my partner met your sister in Melbourne. And I said, I just had a really strange feeling that we were going to bump into you. And she was like really freaked out. So we carried on shopping, and like we were walking down an aisle and she was walking the other way, and she kind of like turned around and walked off. So it was, that was an amazing synchronicity. And then when we traveled further up the country and over to the west coast of Australia, we pulled up in this really small, like proper small back like country town called Exmouth. And we got out of the car and we wanted to stay at this caravan park. Well, anyway, it was full for this one night. So we went across the road to this
run down caravan park, and they like we stayed there for one night, and I put the tent up in the field, and then I was feeling kind of like down and a bit disgruntled. So I said, I'm going to go and change my book at the book exchange. So I walked in, handed the woman my book, gave the woman my book, walked to the shelf at the back, and the first book that I picked up was Don't Sweat the Small Stuff, and it's all small stuff. And it literally just blew my mind. I just was like, how can that happen? Like, how is it that I've seen a sister, and then also I've picked up this book of all the books in the world?
Awesome.
I pick up that one book. So yeah, and even at that point, I was still an atheist at that point. So it still took a while for the penny to drop. But yeah, these stories, we all have them. So that was that's another thing that convinces me about the higher power thing, because you when you get to talk to people, every single person that you talk to in recovery has got multiple synchronicity stories.
Oh, absolutely.
And you just think to yourself, how can that be? If everybody's got these stories, then it just proves beyond doubt for me that everybody and everything is interconnected.
I believe that 100%.
And what does life in recovery mean to you, Amy?
Well, life in recovery is amazing. It's having that peace of mind. It's having, these things that I do on a regular basis for my recovery, but also for self-care and, taking care of the people around me, but only after I've taken care of myself first. And, like having a career that's successful, and it's all about helping other people recover and getting all of those modalities that they need, not just the 12 steps, but everything that's available out there. Like there's so many things that are at the disposal of people that can afford to do it, that, helps your brain a million times over. And so, it's exciting being connected with people all over the world that are in recovery, that just having those real conversations, and not just the surface stuff, but just really being able to connect to people on a much deeper level. And when I walk away from people, it doesn't leave me drained. It's that energizing, power that makes me just want to change the world,
Yeah. Have you ever considered writing a book about your life?
I have, actually. I went to Hawaii 3 weeks ago, and I started writing some of the harder stuff that I've talked about today. Yeah. And, I'm just hoping to, get inspiration on, how I want to write it, and if I want a publisher involved and all of that stuff. So it's definitely on the radar, and I've been told to write a book for 20 years. So we'll see what happens.
Yeah, I mean, you've definitely got an incredible story there, and I'm sure that it would be well read and well received. And what does your life look like now? Your two daughters in your life still?
So I have 3 daughters now. My oldest daughter, the one that I lost custody of, she's 28 years old and a huge part of my life. My middle daughter, the one that I was pregnant with when I had my last relapse, is 22 now, and she's pregnant with twin baby boys.
Oh,
so
wow.
I'm going to be a grandma.
Congratulations.
Thank you. And my youngest daughter is engaged to a guy in England, and in her 3rd year of college at McAllister in Minnesota. And, life couldn't be better. I've been with the same man for 22 years, and that's a coincidence story in and of itself, as I met him when I was about a year sober, and we got married a few years later. And he, I just think that my higher power definitely has a sense of humor, and the fact that that man that I married is a cop.
Brilliant.
So,
yeah.
And nobody that I met in jail, and he would have ran screaming for me. He's a really good guy, super down to earth, and just, I don't know. My life is absolutely amazing today. I And I owe a big portion of my life to Salvation Army and the 12 steps and trauma therapy and all the people that have come across my path that have told me, read this book or read that book or do this or do that. And for that moment, I was awakened enough to listen to it, to read The Seed of the Soul and the 7 principles of highly effective people, and to look at these things and apply them to my life, because I've been on that path of the 12 steps. And one of my sponsors said, like, the 12 steps are designed to help you get your brain to a place where those self-help books and all of those suggestions out there for normal people that are written by normal people can work for people like us.
Yeah,
and
I agree.
That has been like one of the most powerful foundations of my whole recovery.
Yeah, I really relate to that, actually, because I read, Eckhart Tolle, The Power of Now.
Yep.
I read that when I was either very newly sober or still, I think I was in my first year of sobriety, but it just didn't really register. Definitely hadn't finished the steps by that point anyway. And then I read it again about 4 or 5 years ago, and just a completely different read, and everything that I read now, like you said, everything self-help or spiritual that I read now, I can actually relate to it. I can actually consider like implementing these things into my life. Whereas when I was drinking and taking drugs, there was just no space for any of that stuff. I just couldn't even, I was so blocked off from the notion of like holistic health that it was never gonna work.
Yeah. Well, I do a lot of holistic health. I mean, I'm totally into essential oils and a lot of other things that help people naturally. And I've been into oils for even before I got sober, but I mean, they absolutely work better now that I am sober and can learn more about them and how to use them. And I'm all about the holistic stuff. I see a shaman and that lady in Australia that I was telling you about that does these guided meditations, and she's absolutely a healer, and I send a lot of people to her. And just, like, people come across my path that are healers in lots of different ways, and I truly believe that once we heal that spiritual malady and we're able to overcome that obsession and that physical craving, that we really are given the power to save people's lives. So we become healers, and healers connect with other healers. I mean, we can't not connect with another person that's on the same path as us.
It's so true. I mean, I've just started sponsoring a guy who's been in prison for 15 years, and we were talking. I took him home after a meeting the other night, and we were talking in the car, and he stepped out of the car and he just said, "I want to thank you so much for how much you're helping me. It's amazing." And it was one of those moments. It was absolutely priceless, and I don't mean that with any sense of ego whatsoever, because I actually said to him, "It's not me. It's not me that's doing this. This is just our higher power. It's it's connection. It's all we're doing is having a conversation. That's all we're doing, and if that's helping you, then that's amazing." And what a gift, like all the material things in the world and all the drugs in the world never made me feel like that.
That's right.
Nothing ever gave me that feeling at all.
Yep. True happiness,
True happiness. Yeah.
We have been looking for instant gratification our whole life, and instant gratification is of a short duration. It lasts like 10 seconds.
Yeah.
True happiness and joy that comes from within lasts forever.
Yeah, it's like real peace of mind, isn't it? I always say in meetings whenever I'm sharing, I always say that I have peace of mind today, and that's what's priceless, because I used to wake up every morning anxious and depressed and and terrified, really terrified, A, about what the day would bring, and also B, about just drinking and taking drugs and just messing myself up and my life and the people around me. And to wake up with that, with true freedom now, is just such a gift.
Such a gift. Such a powerful gift.
What would you say if you had like maybe a few words for anybody out there that was struggling or maybe considering like changing their life, what would you say to them?
I would say go to a meeting, get a tribe, look for the people that are doing the work, go to step studies, if you're a woman, find a women's meeting that there are strong people like doing what they say that they're doing. I would have benefited so much by finding that in the beginning. Today, I do a big book workshop in my home on Tuesday nights, and I am the great connector, like anybody that comes to Denver, like I'm going to connect you to the best meetings, to the best people, help you find a sponsor, like do all of those things in order to get the best foundation that you could possibly have.
Well, one day I'm going to take you up on that offer, and I'm going to come over to Colorado, and we're going to hang out and go to meetings, and
Yes.
and it'll be a pleasure.
Yes.
Yeah.
Please do.
And what an absolute pleasure it's been talking with you as well. So thank you so much for your time. It's been amazing. I love the conversation. Is there anything, the therapy that you mentioned as well? Could you possibly send me a link to that so that I can put the link up underneath the podcast? Would that be okay?
Yes, I would love to.
Brilliant. Well, thanks so much. And
Thank you.
what time is it there?
It is almost 1 p.m.
Cool. So you've got the day ahead. Have you got any plans?
Yes, I'm going to get a massage right now. I have a lady in my basement all set up and waiting for me.
Amazing. Well, enjoy your massage.
Thank you so much.
I'm so glad I asked.
Yeah.
Thanks very much for listening. If you've been affected by any of the issues discussed in the podcast, please see links to a range of mutual aid organisations underneath the podcast link. And please don't forget to subscribe and give us a 5-star rating. And you can also support the podcast now via Patreon at www.patreon.com/life in recovery, and you can donate anything you like, really. A couple of pound, £10 a month, whatever you feel that the podcast is worth to you. Is it worth a cup of coffee? So yeah, anything would really, really help to market the podcast and spread the word of recovery far and wide. Please visit www.lifeinrecovery.co.uk for my books and social media links. And if you'd like to get in touch, email me rencoy@lifeinrecovery.co.uk. Peace and love, and goodbye for now.